This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
You may have heard me discussing last week how I built out a model for totals in the NFL during the week. And I was like, okay, I've been putting this off for a while. I've wanted to do it. I've wanted to have that both for betting and also for daily fantasy purposes. And so I made the model last week. Bad timing, because this week in week 16 is an outlier in terms of the weather across the Midwest. We've got games with 27 mile per hour winds. We've got blizzards. We've got snow. We've got blowing snow, dangerous wind conditions. And it's tough to have a lot of confidence in a model that you just built when you get extremes. So tough timing on that. It is going to be a defining key of this slate, is trying to identify, do we want to just stay away from these wind games? How does it impact things? Who could benefit from this stuff? And it's a lot of questions to be answered. So we're going to break down week 16 in the NFL, take a look at what my numbers are saying for this week, focusing primarily on not the totals to avoid that one pitfall there, and also take a look at my updated power rankings entering week 16. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire here, like I said, to break down NFL week number 16, take a look at what my numbers are saying in terms of spreads, money lines, and totals this week, and also taking a look at my updated power rankings entering week 16. We'll also recap what went down here on the show this past week. Before we do that, though, quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Funky schedule for this week because of travel. I'll be leaving to travel for the holidays on Wednesday night. So we're going to record our week 16 full NFL preview on Wednesday. Austin Swain will swing by, break down his thoughts on the week 16 slate. Also tomorrow, our first college basketball, men's college basketball breakdown of the year. John Rothstein will swing by and talk about early takeaways from this year, teams that he thinks may be legit, teams that have struggled that may bounce back, and more. So good to talk to John once again, as we did last year prior to the Final Four. That'll be up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed in the afternoon. We'll also have the Week 16 breakdown in the evening, FanDuel YouTube page, and up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Looking to get more out of this NFL season? Well, now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's free bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to touchdown scores to over-under yards. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So you don't miss out your chance on your first no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in free bets when you join FanDuel. Make every moment more this season with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. Refund issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Kansas and Wyoming, 1-800-522-4700. In Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. In Louisiana, 1-877-770-STOP. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Or in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Now, as we did here on the show last week, I wanted to go through the power rankings in my two models to discuss where things stand right now, some discrepancies, some teams that may be higher than expected or lower than expected, and break down takeaways from that heading into week 16. Now, as with last week, this will include injury adjustments for week 16 specifically. So this includes the Eagles under Gardner Minshew for this week, meaning you will not hear me talk about the Eagles in the top tier this week. Long term, they still rank third in my unadjusted model behind Buffalo and Kansas City. So we can still be super optimistic about the Eagles, but they will not be in the upper tier for this week as a result of the downgrade from Hurts down to Minshew. The top of the power rankings between the two models is the same as last week. The Chiefs in one, the Bills in the other. And again, in case you weren't here last week, the reason the Chiefs are lower in one is because the other model expects regression for how efficient they've been on late downs. They have been unreal. Now, that's the reason they're lower. They're still second behind the Bills in that model. But it's important to note that that regression may not occur because Patrick Mahomes is not human. So that may not happen. And it's possible that that model is underrating them as a result. But that's why they're lower there again. They're still second behind the Bills, but that's why they're first in one, second in the other. That's the one thing there. The Bills in the model with the Chiefs are first, or actually third. And the reason they're third is because the 49ers have actually jumped them. They are up to second in my traditional model. I've been adjusting them down each week for Brock Purdy and then for Deebo Samuel. And I just keep on adjusting less and less as the sample expands on them playing well with Purdy instead of Garoppolo. Now, I could be wrong on this. There is still a downward adjustment because I have a lot of respect for how efficient an offense can be under Jimmy Garoppolo. And it's hard to expect Purdy to keep this up when there's no Deebo Samuel for this week specifically. So I think this number could be too high. It could be too optimistic about this 49ers team, but this defense is playing lights out. Purdy has been very efficient in his first 3 games. So I don't know, man. It's hard to keep on being wrong on them because I'm over adjusting due to injuries. It could just be variance. It could be that I've just been wrong by happenstance these past couple of weeks, but I think for me, I think it's the right approach to keep adjusting down less and less as Purdy keeps on playing well without Deebo. I have interest in the 49ers this week. After I've betting against them for like the past month or so, I have interest now. This will probably be the week where Purdy regresses, turns back into sophomore, junior, senior year Brock Purdy. Freshman year Brock Purdy is pretty sweet. But like this could be the year where he turns back into the college version. We'll see, but I'm more in now on them than I have been previously. We talked about Dallas, talked about Cincinnati, those 2 teams still in the top 5 for me this week. No real changes there. Philly will be there once they're healthy. One team I want to highlight in being very interesting is the Jags. Again, this is with injury adjustments. So they're above the Eagles based on this model, but my traditional model has the Jags ranked 8th. That's very high. But it's the same discussion we had last week with the Lions, where that model leans heavily on passing efficiency, and Trevor Lawrence is shredding right now. The Jags actually rank 3rd in adjusted passing efficiency by numberFire's metrics. My numbers have been high in the Jags throughout this year. And it could be that this is continuing into this model, and you're like, okay, you've gotten too high on them. I can understand that. My model has told me to bet the Jags money line 7 times this year. They were underdogs in all 7 of those games, but the Jags went 6-1 in those games as underdogs in every single one. So although the model has been high on them, I don't think it's been wrong on them. Now, the Jags get the Jets this week. The Jets are super high in my other model, so there is disagreement here. One model says you bet the Jags, one says you bet the Jets. I'm going to stay away as a result of that, but I do think the Jags are a very good offense. I was going to say good team, but defense can be a little bit shaky. They might not be 8th like the one model has them right now, but I'm very into them. They'd be 9th again if you put Jalen Hurts back on the Eagles, but I think they're very fun. So the Jags, a team that my numbers have been high on all throughout this year, they're still high on them, and I don't know if it's necessarily wrong to be that high. The final team I wanted to touch on is the Steelers. Their defense, really, really good with TJ Watt being back, and that matters a lot. So in the model that I think is more right on them, they rank 14th right now, again, adjusting for health. That is an upward adjustment for TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, a downward adjustment in for some other teams. So 14th is high. They're 11th in the other. That's probably too high. I don't know. That one seems a little bit high, but my model does have a positive ROI in betting their money lines this year, and that's the model that's lower on them. I would not hand rank them in this high, but they're playing better football. I think it's flown a bit under the radar how good they've been. The one model, the one that's higher on them, does like the Steelers -2.5 against the Raiders this week. I don't think that's totally unfair. The other one disagrees, so I'm not betting on that one, but I do think it's noteworthy how high the Steelers are once you put Watt in there. And it's also worth mentioning, like, there's been this streak of Mike Tomlin finishing above 500. They could still do that if they went out, and it's not like totally outlandish, so they're not going to make the playoffs, but like I think that the Steelers are better than expected. So if you're feeling good about the Raiders this week, after their big win last week, give some consideration to how good that Steelers defense is with TJ Watt being in there, and make sure you still want to bet the Raiders after considering those factors. So power rankings there. Again, top 5 teams pretty definitive for me. Putting the 49ers back in there after adjusting less down for Purdy and no Debo, and then the Eagles back up there too once you put Hurts back in there. But for right now, that is where things stand. The power rankings. Let's take those power rankings now and parlay them into week 16 and take a look at where we're seeing value for this week. Now, I talked before about how the Jags and the Jets game is interesting because one model likes the Jags, one likes the Jets. Had the same thing this past week where one model said bet the Lions, one model said bet the Jets. Now, that's the different issue for this week, but the model that liked the Lions obviously did wind up winning that bet, or the battle between the two models there. And that model wants to bet the Lions once again this week. So I'm going to lay the 2.5 with the Lions on the road against the Panthers. Now, that word road may have gotten your attention because there's this road to Jared Goff narrative. And I don't blame them. Jared Goff in the past, when he was with the Rams, didn't look good when he played outdoors, when he played in cold temperatures. 29 degrees, the temperature for this game. But if you look at the games that Jared Goff has played on the road with a fully healthy Amon-Ra St. Brown this year, he's at 0.31 passing net expected points per dropback, which is numberFire's EPA model. Tends to be a little bit higher than some of the other EPA models. So scale that down a bit. But even if you just look at Goff's passing EPA in those games, it's sick. It's a disgusting number. So I'm not expecting them to continue to be that good, but can they cover 2.5 against the Panthers? I think with this offense, they probably can. I've got an upgrade in there for the Panthers with Sam Darnold. I think that they're a better team now than they were before. I think that does matter, but the defense is playing pretty good football right now. Goff has been very efficient. He had the second highest EPA per dropback against the Jets in a game this year, behind Jacoby Brissett, up there with Joe Burrow as well. So this game opened at 3, got under 3 to 2.5 overnight. So I will lay the 2.5 with the Lions in this one. The model's been high on them for the past month and a half or so, and they've been great. So I'm not going to stop that now, despite respecting what the Panthers have done since adding Sam Darnold into the fold. We've got the snow game in Cleveland, and again, from a total perspective, I'm not sure what to do with this one. If I add the wind speed in here, it does drop the total by 5 points. That's something, but currently the wind speeds for Cleveland versus New Orleans are projected at 27 miles per hour. It sounds miserable. I'm going to take the Saints +3 in this game. Both of my models say this number should be under 3 here. Once you suck that total down to 31.5, make it a lower scoring game, I think that becomes even more valuable to get the 3 points here in what could be a very low scoring game. The Saints passing offense has been weirdly efficient under Andy Dalton. The counterpoint is that may not matter given the weather. And we think of Nick Chubb. Always think of Nick Chubb when it comes to the winds being high, bad weather. Like, okay, Browns can lean on Nick Chubb, but the Saints can also do that with Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara. I think we're kind of overlooking the Taysom factor in this game. I'm not as low on the Browns as most people are right now. I think that they've shown some signs of improvement recently, especially once you account for weather last week, the Ravens defense last week, and stuff like that. I just think this should be under 3. So I'm going to take the points here and roll with the Saints +3 against the Browns for this week. I talked last week about how I typically don't tease games because I have a hard time finding multiple games I like that fit the ideal criteria and get me across some key numbers. This week is very different because I think there are 3 teams that are legitimately worth teasing. Those teams are the 49ers, the Titans, and the Ravens. You can pick whichever combo of those 2 that you want. With a 6-point teaser, but the 49ers favored by 7.5 against the Commanders, the Titans favored by 7 against the Texans, and the Ravens favored by 7.5 against the Falcons. My 2 preferred ones here are the 49ers and the Ravens. I know there's the risk of Lamar Jackson not playing, but I'm also a tad worried about Ryan Tannehill not playing for the Titans. I think Lamar should be good to go for the Ravens. So my preferred route here would be to tease the 49ers to 1.5 and the Ravens to 1.5 as well. If you do that at FanDuel Sportsbook, it's at -134. You can get a better number than that elsewhere. So I would recommend shopping around. I got a -120. So shop around on this, both with that combo and with the others. I've got the 49ers favored by 10.6 in this game, the Titans favored by 8.6, and the Ravens favored by 8.7. So all three of those games showing value relative to their current spread in a vacuum, and it gets me across both 3 and 7 for all three of these games. So I would give consideration to those three. I'd prefer them as teaser legs versus straight bets because you are across the key number of 7, and the odds it lands on 7 exactly are pretty high. The odds lands on 3 are still pretty high as well, which is why I prefer them as teaser legs versus straight up. But all three very in play for me, with Baltimore and San Francisco being the preferences for this week. Finally, I think you could give some thought to the Eagles with Gardner Minshew. That number's at 6 right now. My two models have the Cowboys favored by 4.0 and 5.7. So again, it's 6 right now, which means the 5.7 one not showing a lot of value, which is why I'm not taking it right now. But I do think it becomes in play if this were to move more. Now, it's still held steady at 6 for a while, and I think that's kind of the fair market value with where things stand right now. We could see that extend. Maybe we get 6.5. Maybe we get 7 once Hurts is officially ruled out. I'm not sure if that'll happen, but I do think that if it does, I'd have interest, potentially in the Eagles money line. It's plus 220 right now. I think there's value in that with Minshew, just because, Minshew's not as good as Hurts. It's not close. He's an actual downgrade, but I think the market's finally reflecting that now with this being at 6 points. The infrastructure here is good. It's tremendous offensive line, tremendous pass catchers, a good defense as well. So the infrastructure matters a lot, and that's in general a big thing for a quarterback. So even with a big downgrade from Hurts to Minshew in my model, I still think the models still think the spread should be 4.0 or 5.7. So if we do get more movement in this game, I could see myself adding the Eagles. I got the Cowboys at -3 at even money yesterday, so I have not taken the Eagles here because I don't really want to nullify what I think is a good bet that's gotten good CLV. But if you see more movement toward the Cowboys, as this one lengthens from 6, maybe to 6.5 or 7, if it gets there, I don't think it will, but if it does, I'd be okay. But in the Eagles at that point, right now, currently a stay away for me. Now, let's talk about the totals because I did build out that model. I don't want it to go totally for naught. And again, probably not going to bet the win games. It's tough. I will get a lot of data on heavy wins, so I guess that's a positive to look forward. So I guess that's a good thing. Looking forward, we can be happy about that. But I don't have a ton of confidence in where it's at right now to encapsulate the outlier spots in terms of the weather and the wind. One spot where it's showing value, the total model, and the wind is not a factor, is in Indianapolis. I want the under on Monday Night Football for the Chargers and the Colts. Now, caveat here is I took the under on Colts Vikings last week. Obviously, that did not go very well. But my model has this total at 41.66. It is 46.5 right now. You can get 47 still at some spots. This Chargers offense isn't one that relies on explosion. It's not an explosive offense unless they're pushed. Like if they have to be explosive, they can be, which means if they were to fall behind against the Colts like the Vikings did, they could claw their way back. As for the Colts offense, they're not going to have Jonathan Taylor, which means they're without their best offensive piece. They might have a tougher time exploiting the Chargers rushing defense. This rush offense has been inefficient with Taylor this year. You take him out, probably going to get worse. So the pace in this game is pretty high. That helps. There's no wind here. That helps. But I think these teams aren't that explosive in their current state, which means they're probably more under teams than they are over teams. The Chargers defense has also made a lot of good strides recently, not necessarily against the rush, but like overall. So I'll take under 46.5, try to dabble in that new model, see what happens for this week. But I think that is the right way to read that Monday night game between the Chargers and the Colts. So to recap, things I am locking in right now. I'm taking the Lions -2.5 against the Panthers, the Saints +3 against the Browns, Colts and Chargers under 46.5, and then considering the 49ers, Titans, and Ravens and teasers down to 1.5 for the Ravens and 49ers and down to 1 for the Titans. And if we get movement in Cowboys Eagles, I'd be willing to add the Eagles, but not totally sold that winds up happening. So overall, I think it's a week where we can avoid the really bad weather, hopefully get some good value, and we'll see how things play out throughout this week. That's all we have for now for the Week 16 first look. Like I said, we'll have our full Week 16 breakdown coming up tomorrow with Austin Swaim, going up in the evening on the FanDuel YouTube page and on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Before we close up for today, though, got to look back at last week and recap stuff here on the show. We had Ed Feng on to preview the World Cup final. What a blast that was. The entire match was a delight. Ed did have France to lift the cup at -106, and the other bet was even goals at -110. So obviously Argentina won. Didn't get that one, but even goals hit as they were tied 2-2 entering extra time. A split on Ed there. I had a lot of fun talking World Cup this year, even though I know nothing about it. I enjoyed watching the games, enjoyed talking about it with people who do know stuff about this sport. I'm looking forward to talking about it again in the summer for the women's tournament. That starts in July. Looked ahead in the calendar to see where that was. So we'll talk about it then in the summer to get some women's World Cup action, but had a fun time with the men's side this year. We had Ryan Williams on to preview the Saturday and Sunday NFL games. Find Ryan on Twitter at @RyanAlexander_W. Ryan went 2-4-1 on the sides and totals this week. He had the Dolphins, Bills over 42.5 and the Jaguars plus 4.5. The losses were the Seahawks plus 3.5, the Bills -7, the Titans, Chargers over 47.5, and the Bucks plus 3.5. Push for Ryan was on the Chargers -3. So still a good year overall for Ryan, and I'm looking forward to having him in a few weeks again once he is back from paternity leave. So we'll talk to Ryan then. I'm looking forward to that for sure. We had JJ Zachariason on to talk props. Yardage bets were Alec Pierce over 38.5 and receiving yards, and Mike Evans under 58.5 receiving yards. And Evans finally showed life, especially early in that game. I know things kind of unraveled for the Bucks, but he looked good early on. He didn't look good. He got some yardage, I guess I should say, early on. So he went over. Pierce went under. Crazy positive script for the Colts in that game. They got ahead by, again, 33-0 at half. So he got 4 targets, didn't catch any of them. But the script there did not work in JJ's favor. Touchdown bet was J.K. Dobbins at plus 220. I think it was a good price shop. It was a lot shorter than that most places. Good matchup. Dobbins ran really well in that game. They just couldn't score. So tough one on that one. But it's kind of the way that things go for sure when talking props. My week was frustrating once again. I had a couple underdog money line winners with the Jags and the Giants. The Jags plus 180, the Giants plus 176. That was good. Again, the Jags been a very good team to me so far this year. The Giants not as good, but had some fun there for sure. Got the push on them 2 weeks before with the Commanders in that same matchup. So that was good. I lost the Seattle money line at plus 154. I deserve to lose that. Totally fair. I had the Vikings Colts under 48.5. Also deserved to lose that. Other two were the Eagles -8.5 and the Vikings -4. The Vikings, very clearly the better team in that game. They made mistakes. That's why they were down 33-0. That's why they had to scramble. If you look at like the actual when they actually had to make drives, the Vikings were the much better team in that game. It still came back to win. Didn't cover. They won by 3. That was frustrating. Eagles won by 5. Bears had that touchdown to Byron Pringle. They'd gotten over 8.5, and then the back. I want to call it a backdoor cover. That undersells the Bears. The Bears played well, and potentially I underestimated them. So backdoor cover, I think, wouldn't accurately portray what went down there. I mentioned the Eagles were a good teaser team. If you tease them from 8.5, it would have been 2.5. I couldn't find anyone to pair them with. Hopefully you did, because I didn't. I took it straight at 8.5. Individual leg there. That loss, that was frustrating. Been a frustrating year overall, especially with both the Eagles and the Vikings winning but not covering. Been a weird year, been an annoying year. Good to get the Jags and the Giants, but overall pretty annoying in week number 15. Finally, we had Tom Vecchio on last night to talk the Rams and the Packers. Find Tom on Twitter at DFS_Tom. Tom went 2 for 3 in yardage props. Probably should have had 3 for 3 there if not for an injury. He was 0 for 1 on the touchdown props. So if you scaled well, you likely profited despite the injury there. The wins were Robert Tonyan under 22.5 receiving yards, Cam Akers over 55.5 rushing. Akers finished 65, looked pretty good in that game. Tonyan had 4, so easy wins there for Tom on those two. The loss was A.J. Dillon, over 49.5 rushing yards. Dillon was at 36 in the third quarter when he left to be evaluated for a concussion and didn't come back. He was looking really good in that game. Ran really well, getting a lot of usage. So the over probably would have hit had Dillon stayed in, but injuries are a part of betting props. Kind of how it goes. You have to account for that in your handicapping. So, Probably should have gone 3 for 3, but that's part of the sport for sure. Can't complain too much, and still profitable night for Tom. Again, if you scaled well, touchdown bet was Alan Lazard at plus 270. Lazard took a bit of a back seat with Romeo Dobbs being back, but overall, I think Tom had a good read on that game, and hopefully you were able to scale well and still profit there. So overall, tough week for the podcast. Hopefully we can bounce back here this upcoming week. I don't know. We'll see. It's been a rough year overall, but we'll see if we can bounce back here in week number 16. I'm happy to have this totals model now to give me another route for finding some value, and we'll see how things play out for this week. That is all that we have here for today on covering the spread. But big day coming up tomorrow, as mentioned. John Rothstein will spring by to break down his early takeaways from the men's college basketball season, talk about some surgers, talk about teams he expects to bounce back, and other takeaways. That'll be up again, probably around 11 or so in the morning on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Then we'll have the week 16 preview with Austin Swaim coming up in the afternoon. 4 shows this week, no show Friday with JJ Zachariason due to that being Christmas Eve. So back with you, or the day before Christmas Eve. Back with you 3 shows next week. No Monday night show next week. Back with you Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets in week 16. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. Talk about some men's college basketball. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.